Good afternoon and welcome to Second Chance. Second Chance is a weekly talk show that examines a wide range of social issues and seeks to inspire physical, emotional, social, and spiritual healing, believing that God is a God of second chances. And through faith, all things are possible. Second Chance airs live each week from the beautiful campus of Oakwood University and features real people with real issues and offers real answers. And now, here's your host, Kenneth Anderson.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Second Chance radio broadcast. I'm Kenny Anderson. As always, delighted to be here with you in the studio for the broadcast. I hope that wherever you are this afternoon, you're having a good Sunday afternoon and a good weekend, as we are just about 1 week away from the magic moment, Christmas 2023. And I hope that everyone is approaching the holiday season with safety, and I'll also add to that sanity, because this is a time of year that presents lots of challenges for people. There's a lot going on, of course, and a lot of movement, a lot of things to think about, and a lot of transition in our lives today. I want to say a few things today about that over the course of our broadcast, but I'll start out the program, first of all, by saying that in this moment, I'm mindful about all of those people out there who are dealing with illness of loved ones, those who are perhaps mourning the loss of a loved one or processing the recent loss, or perhaps the loss of a loved one that's missing from their particular home right now. I'm mindful of those that are going through financial challenges at this time of year. I'm mindful of those who are going through crises of their spirituality or the foundation of their faith. There's a lot going on out there, folks, and wherever you are this afternoon, I hope that you're having an opportunity to catch your breath, be reflective in this moment, and embrace it for what it is, because we literally only have this moment that we're in right now. And just take a look around you, and it doesn't take much to understand the fragility of our lives. And so this afternoon, as we start our broadcast, I want to welcome everyone who's tuning in. If you're tuning in at 90.1 FM, welcome to the broadcast. That means that you're locked and loaded on our radio station. I hope you're tuning in this afternoon somewhere in this world on WJLU.org, because through the power of the internet, we now have the opportunity to reach you wherever you might be this afternoon. And I hope that you're having a good afternoon. And then, of course, for those that want the bonus cut, those who are smart enough, sharp enough, and able enough to run on over to Facebook now or YouTube and check out the live stream at Praise 90.1 FM, folks. You don't want to miss the conversation that we have today. It's my What's Going On social and political roundtable discussion that we have at least twice a month on the first and the third Sundays, absolutely, and sometimes an occasional fifth Sunday. And I'm delighted to have this opportunity to talk with a group of some pretty sharp brothers in this moment this afternoon. Every show this year dedicated to the life and legacy of my mother-in-law, Mother Ernestine Fletcher Tibbs, who we are establishing the first endowed scholarship for the social work department at Alabama A&M University. I'm going to have some really big news over the next couple of weeks about the establishment of this scholarship. We have been gradually inching towards our goal, and there have been some significant things that have happened over the past couple of weeks that are really moving the trajectory of closing in on that final goal of $25,000. So over the next couple of weeks, folks, just stay tuned. I'm going to have, at least I'm anticipating having a big announcement about being able to do that. And, of course, my good friend Dr. Tanya Perry, who leads the charge out there with all of those wonderful and fantastic and phenomenal social work students at Alabama A&M University. It's going to be a winner for them as well. I interviewed my next two interns, in fact, who are going to be with me during the spring semester of 2023. Of course, shout out to Roman Peppers, who was with me this past fall, who just graduated on December the 8th. Got a chance to see him walk across the stage and get his bachelor's degree in social work. Congratulations to him. And, of course, congratulations to all the graduates who are experiencing a moment of transition in your lives right now in celebration. A shout-out to Michael Cooper, who graduated yesterday, the son of Mark and Michelle Cooper in North Carolina. Of course, there are lots and lots of people. I better stop naming names because I'll get in trouble if I miss somebody and somebody said, you didn't mention the fact that I graduated or my kid graduated. Everything I'm saying this afternoon about graduation encompasses you too. I see my sister Jackie out there listening in. Hey, Tiki, how you doing this afternoon? Good to see you on the feed. And, of course, this is an opportunity now for me to bring the brothers into the conversation. So I'm going to do that without any further delay because I'm sure they've got a lot to say to me today. And, of course, you're the beneficiaries because you're going to be here tuned into the process. First of all, I want to introduce David Person, and I typically start with David Person because if you listen to the program long enough, you know that David is the co-founder of this broadcast as he supported me in the early stages, the infancy of my media work that now has stretched out in this space for a little over 33 years. And so I usually start with him because he's the foundation in many ways. He gave me that opportunity, believed in me, supported me, mentored me, and continues to do that. And so I get to say first, every time he's on the show, what's up, bro?
Hey, what's happening, man? Good to see you. Good to be here as always. So proud to be associated with you and this great program that has been in existence now for over 30 years. It's amazing, man.
It really is, and you and I both have those conversations with people, and we know that they've got kids who are less than 33 years old. And it's kind of like, wow, we've been around for a while.
Yes, indeed.
And it's funny, too. We had an experience recently where we were at an event and we were we're going around the table introducing ourselves and talking about our experience in the area. And I'm always just kind of, I'm amused, but I'm also humbled whenever somebody says, oh, you guys have been at it for a long time. as they listen to what we share about our experience. And, of course, Dave, you're one of the, in my mind, one of the godfathers of this work because you've been at it for so much longer, and it's the area of expertise that you have cultivated and nurtured for so many years, and it has produced in so many wonderful ways over the years in so many different arenas. So I always defer to you and your experience, but I'm sitting in the room and saying, boy, they're saying that about me. Pretty cool stuff.
Well, let's just say God has blessed us both. And of course, this wasn't this was my intended destination, meaning media, right? So I've been blessed to do print, TV, radio, internet, podcasting on a local and national level. But for you, this is a secondary kind of, this is like an avocation for you. Your vocation, has been, of course, in the mental health field, health and wellness field. And yet you have also made significant strides in two, including media, 3 other areas, because, you made your mark in academia, you made your mark in, you've made your mark in government, so it's really interesting how God opens up doors for us. And if we try to be faithful, try to be obedient, and of course our best efforts are often fraught with mistakes and missteps, but nonetheless, God takes us broken people and uses us, man.
Yeah, he really does. And you hit on something I think that's really the key in this thought, in this moment, because if you had have asked me 40 years ago what the direction of my life would have been, I would not have crafted what has happened. I would not have expressed what has happened. And I would not have even really imagined what has happened, because, and it wasn't a matter of me not having confidence in my abilities, but it's just like, how would I, why would I end up, having a 16-year career in education, higher education? Why would I end up now having a 10.5-year experience in public service and government? I was a mental health professional. I was totally sold out on that, anticipated that my entire career would be spent primarily in that particular space. And even though I've not left it at all, because I still get a chance to do things, and whether they're seminars or, one-on-one kinds of experiences that I have from time to time. I maintain 100 hours of CEUs every 5 years to maintain my certification. So I'm still in it, but it's interesting how, as you said, through being obedient and allowing God to order your steps, so many more things have happened in that context. And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, and so much of it, I think, this will be the final thing I'll say, because I know you need to bring the other brothers on, but, so much of that, I think, ultimately comes down to not being afraid, not being afraid to try new things, to be a little adventurous, to trust in opportunities that we don't always fully understand. Just so much of it is about not being afraid. If we can move past our fears and just trust that God has something for us, then I think things happen.
Yeah. Well, there's a subtext to that too, because there is not a speech course listed on my transcript because of my fear of public speaking. But that's a different story. We'll talk about that another time.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
Dr. Keith Burton is waiting patiently to get into this conversation. It is always great to see him as part of this conversation. And I greet him as I always greet him, with the phrase, Assalamu alaikum, my brother.
Alaikum salam. And Kenny, it's hard for me to believe you have a fear of public speaking, but then again, it's not, because as one who has taught public speaking, we do know, and David can confirm this as a communicator, they say about 80% of people experience a fear of public speaking as a state. When we get in that environment, we get a little fearful. I still do sometimes, and I could stand in front of an audience of 2, 3, 4, 5,000 and feel perfectly fine. And I could be in front of an audience of 50, and all of a sudden my nerves are filling me. Sort of a state, and it doesn't really, have any predictability to it. But then there are 20% of people who actually experience fear as a trait. And so we do have that minority, that 1 in 5, who really are terrified. And when they do it, they have to kind of go against themselves, But as I was listening to you and Dave, I thought about our ancestors. And thinking about our ancestors that were confined on plantations, and all they had to do was whatever the overseer said, that's what they did. But now we're living in an age where we can be social workers and educators and media personnel and do this, that, and the other. And when I think of how far we've come in many ways, I am always concerned about those who don't take advantage of opportunities, because again, I don't take this for granted that I'm here. And I also am fully aware that the freedoms that we enjoy today could easily be taken away tomorrow. And so I'm just so glad that we've had an opportunity. And I thank God for our Oakwood University that I think ignited something in all of us, that enabled us to
Absolutely.
realize our
Yeah.
potential and understand it. Even upbringing in church, having to repeat things before, audiences, etc., memorize things, etc., it's prepared us for this moment. And as much as we may, sometimes be a little critical about church, etc., I am thankful for those things that it has sowed into me and us, so that
Yeah.
we have these opportunities to really make a difference.
Yeah, Keith, you make a great point. You make some great points, actually, because there is a distinct difference. I mean, if you, it's not something I necessarily talk about to people because I don't want to compare and make people feel a little bit uneasy if that's the case. But, I've been in situations where I was thinking they had to have the benefit of the kinds of things that I had the benefit of experiencing. And, whether that was being entrusted with the opportunity to teach a Sabbath school class when I was 16 years old, to sing and attend a church school where there was a choir and where there were activities that took place that required team building and team efforts and speaking and other kinds of activities. Maybe for some it was sports, but, there was always something happening that was pouring into us. The reason I'm a stamp collector is because of my 7th and 8th grade teacher, Gloria Garrett, who, had that interest and encouraged us to pursue our hobby, something that we might become interested in. And it's something that has followed me throughout the course of my life. And so I think about all of those awesome experiences. And like you said, whatever criticisms we may have, which are certainly fair, we also, at least I also, always try to balance that with understanding that I was extremely blessed and extremely fortunate to have been given that opportunity to be in those places, exposed to those people, and benefit from them in those kinds of ways. I even think about the intersections of, being in New York. We had Northeastern Academy, we had Greater New York Academy. My sister and I, Jackie, went to Northeastern. My other sister, my younger sister, went to Greater New York. But her going to Greater New York exposed me to a whole different population of people that I would not have had a chance to experience had it not been for the fact that she was there, maybe. And so just those kinds of intersections of my life, I attribute to the fact that some of the lifelong relationships and friendships that I have today, from going to summer camp and participating in Bible bowls and other kinds of things, that came from being a kid growing up in that environment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff, my brother. Absolutely. Looking forward to talking to you further today. Waiting most patiently, of course, Dr. Frederick Greene, who I just saw last night, actually, at the 100 Black Men of Huntsville Gala, annual holiday gala, which is kind of a big deal. I'm getting a little blowback, Fred. I think maybe when I'm speaking, you may want to put yourself on mute, and then I'll stop talking and let you jump on in there. That's much better. Thank you. But just saw Fred last night at that event. Wonderful event. I'm a member of the 100. I've been a member now for about 20 years. Next year, we celebrate our 25th anniversary as an organization in this community and part of the, I'm going to say, the global network of the 100, since there's a chapter in London and there's a chapter in Turks and Caicos as well. And so we have a footprint. We had a South African chapter at one time, but we no longer have that chapter. But the footprint of the 100 and the work that we do on behalf of mentoring young boys as well as health and wellness, financial literacy, and so much more, providing scholarship support for those that graduate from high school, working with their parents, encouraging them, standing by their side, and helping them move forward. Just a great way to celebrate the end of the year and all of the great things that have happened during the past year. But Fred, it's good to see you on the broadcast today. How are you doing this afternoon?
Doing real well, Kenny. I also enjoyed the show last night, or the program. That is a tremendous organization that does a lot of good, a lot of mentoring, etc. And so, very happy to be there, and good to see you and a few other people there last night.
Absolutely. And, Fred, I was sitting here as I was reflecting on things in the past with Dave and Keith. I thought about our first relationship as it developed at Oakwood College then, around our love for journalism, your work with the Spreading Oak, and the fact that you embraced me as a young writer who had spent some time writing for the Spreading Oak ever since I was a freshman, actually. But certainly during your tenure, came on board, and you were a more robust editor of the Spreading Oak and supported the Spreading Oak. And, again, those kinds of experiences, I translate so many years later. Dave is working for the Huntsville Times at that time. I applied to become a community columnist, writing a column once a year. And all of those things, again, come from those things that we've been exposed to way back when. And I'm thinking about that Spreading Oak experience, Fred. That was really a wonderful and awesome experience with your trailblazing work.
Well, Kenny, it was great working with you. I'll tell you something. We published 14 papers in the course of 2 quarters. And I don't think that record's ever been matched or beat since then. I think it's the only time Oakwood had a weekly paper. And back then when the quarters were shorter, that was considered weekly. Obviously didn't publish any Thanksgiving, etc. So it was a great time. And I'm sure without support from people like you, it wouldn't have happened. It was a team effort.
Well, it was a lot of fun. I just remember those conversations about what we were going to cover and what we were going to write about, and then executing the process and meeting publishing deadlines and other kinds of things like that was certainly a lot of fun back in the day, and I appreciate that. Guys, I'm going to flip the script today because there's really a lot going on, and I want to talk about a lot of things. I don't normally start with pop culture, but I'm going to start with pop culture by asking David Person. Dave, what's up with your boy Draymond Green? Do tell, my brother, do tell, because somebody wants to know, and a lot of people are asking questions. This latest suspension, of course, has rocked the basketball world in some ways, but a lot of people see my boy Draymond as a loose cannon anyway, and so they kind of anticipate something like this could happen.
Yeah, well, I guess we've been building to this point. I mean, I was looking at some videos over the weekend that sort of, it was sort of a mashup of the Draymond incidents. He punched Jordan Poole in the face. That video's out, by the way, now too, from the Golden State Warriors practice where he punched Jordan Poole in the face, and I mean, he punched him like Muhammad Ali punched somebody in the ring. I mean, it was like that. It was a solid. It wasn't this. A lot of times when NBA guys fight, they almost look like kids in the schoolyard, kind of flailing at each other. No, this was a straight up, solid right cross to the face. I mean, it was really something. And then the Rudy Gobert situation, the situation where he stomped on this guy's chest. I mean, it's just sort of, we've been coming to this point. So you say, what's wrong with Draymond? The speculation is that he's got some off-court issues that are going on, and in fact, I think it was Kendrick Perkins for ESPN said he just doesn't think he wants to play basketball right now. And I think there's something to what he's saying, that there's something going on in his life, perhaps, that has made him especially volatile right now. Though obviously there's a pattern, that goes back several years. So, is this an ongoing issue that he's dealing with that maybe is culminating right now? Or is this just his personality? And then when he has intense stress off the court, he reverts to this sort of behavior. I don't know. We can speculate, but it's unfortunate because the truth of the matter is, he's probably going to go to the Hall of Fame. Because of his he's got 4 rings. He's been lauded as a premier kind of player, really revolutionizing in some ways the point forward position, which he's playing it at a level that we really haven't seen since Larry Bird, I would argue. I can't think of anybody who's been a more effective point forward than Draymond Green since Larry Bird. So, hopefully he'll get it together. I mean, it's sad to kind of see, it really is.
Yeah, it's indicative of other flameouts that we've seen, and whether they're other sports. We've seen it across the spectrum of celebrity, and when I say celebrity, I'm thinking about movie stars like Shia LaBeouf, Mel Gibson, some of the more notable ones that we've seen, and Ryan O'Neal, who we're going to mention in just a few moments, his tempestuous relationship with his kids. We see these kinds of things that happen with people. I think a lot of times, Keith, we forget that these people are people. We kind of place them in the celebrity category, like as if these things should not be a part of their lives. And as shocking as they may be, as unfortunate as they might be, to me, they really represent the humanity that sits in all of us and the potential to do some of these kinds of things. What do you think?
Yeah, and so, we are all human. And in fact, I'm recording the last show that we had, the last What's Going On. And there's a statement that both you and Dave made. And I thought about something when you we were speaking about Adam Clayton Powell. And we spoke about the life of contradictions, as it were. And I thought about it. I said, the amount of preachers we know that do things that he said is not really a contradiction in a sense. It's a complication. But the reality is, even as we think about the accusations or the rumors about King, etc., that there is the reality of our humanity. And it seems that, we expect things of preachers, and I think we should. I mean, as a pastor, I do think that, who is it? One of my teachers said, one of his members said to him, "It's okay for you to be good because you're paid to be good." And I think about that as part of your calling. My check does say that, hey, you're supposed to be an example. It doesn't lessen my humanity, but that is some sort of incentive. And who knows, maybe more folk would be good if there was a financial incentive. I don't know. But that is a reality. But I think one unfortunate thing, Kenny, is that once people are in the public eye, it's like, for the most part, they all become clergy, and so we expect this perfection. And we really don't know with Draymond, what's going on in his life. We don't know what demons he's fighting, and of course, the fact that he's being given time to work things out, I think that in itself is an extension of grace, in that sense. But we often judge people by that moment. Will Smith, for instance, remember the slap heard around the world? We judge by that moment. And only now, after Jada's last book, etc., are we understanding how fully complicated that relationship is. That she seemed like she was more shocked than the slap than with the slap than Chris Rock, and but it's just a complicated thing, and we hold folk to these high standards. And I do understand, looking at these public figures as role models. I do understand that, but again, I think exercising grace, which is what I think the NBA has done in this case, in saying, okay, we're going to give you some time. And I kind of wish that that was more frequent. I think the bit which that was more frequent, we kind of don't use this word, but I'm going to use it. We kind of cancel folk very quickly, after one mistake sort of thing. But we are all humans. We are all humans. In fact, I remember writing the obituary for my mother and remembering my mother was very loving, but then she also did not spare the rod, right? And so she was a very complicated person. And how I summed up her life, I said she was a human being, a human being,
Mm.
a human being, a human being, because that's who we are. We are all complicated, complicated. And I think that in all of our relationships, even with those public figures who do things that disappoint us, it behooves us to say, like Dwight L. Moody, there go I, if it were not for the grace of God.
Mm. Fred, what do you think about the notion that the price that celebrities pay in these moments is really part of the price that they pay because they are public figures and they can't have it both ways? When they're on top and everyone's celebrating them and they're winning awards and, it's just a beautiful, wonderful experience and everyone is, following them and lifting them up for various reasons. And they're very public about that. They've got their publicists. They're out there on the rounds. They're making all of their things known. And then when something like this happens, there's this kind of an effort to do spin control or push it aside or ask for what Keith is saying, grace or compassion. A lot of people just argue that's the territory. That's the price that they pay as a consequence of that. What do you think about that?
I'll tell you something. Dr. Burton, as a pastor, and I have tremendous respect for you as a pastor. I understand your compassion. And David, as a sports fanatic, I understand your sense of, hey, this he needs this time. But see, Kenny, I'm going to send him to you. He needs counseling. He needs mental health counseling. He needs to control his temper. You can make millions of dollars, but there's some basic things you still have to learn to do. You still have to play nice in the sandbox. You still have to treat others with respect. And he's demonstrating over and over and over. I mean, that's how they got to an indefinite suspension. And so, I have compassion for him too. I understand. I don't know what's going on in his life, but he needs counseling. And I think they ordered that as part of his indefinite suspension, is that he seeks counseling. And I hope someone can help him recognize and understand that we have certain responsibilities, keeping our hands to ourselves, and to the extent that we have control over our own limbs. And that some of the things, I know they say it was an accident. There's some of the instances he says he didn't intend, but the ones that he did intend, hopefully he could find some counseling where he can address the issues that may be causing him that.
So, Fred, I don't deny that he needs some counseling. Hey, Fred, by the way, you may want to try some earbuds or a headset or something that might help us with the audio, because your audio's a little bit sketchy. So try if you have some headphones or earbuds, try to plug those in. That may help out. But what I wanted to say in response to what Fred is saying, it's interesting how we say that Draymond needs counseling, and I don't dispute that. But isn't it interesting that in hockey, fighting is built into the whole culture of the game, and nobody says these hockey players need counseling. When they drop off their gloves and square off and start fighting, that's viewed as part of the sport. So it's interesting how just the different culture of one sport dictates counseling for somebody who fights, but then for another person, in another sport, it's nobody's talking about counseling or anything like that.
That's a great point. And one that we'll continue to consider as we watch the Draymond Green story evolve. It's interesting, too, to Fred's point. I am a mental health counselor, and oftentimes I look at things through the lens of mental health. But I go back to the original premise that Dave made, that none of us do know what's going on with Draymond. I would hope that he would have people within his sphere of influence that would be influential enough to say to him, Draymond, talk to me. Giving him that option. You can't compel a person or force a person to do that, but someone he really trusts, if there's somebody out there like that, someone he listens to, if there's a person out there like that, to really kind of say, look, brother, there's some things, some choices that you're making that are concerning. Very much like you would doing an intervention, but I'm not suggesting he have an intervention. Maybe it gets to that point, but just a trusted person, because Draymond he's a strong brother. He just has strong ideas about a lot of things. He plays physically. He plays the game aggressively. But when you compare his aggression to others' aggressions who contain the aggression, it becomes a different look. And that point about hockey is an excellent point, because people go to hockey games because they know the guys are going to square off.
Yeah.
They know it.
That's right. And one other thing just popped into my mind real quickly about Draymond. That he is that he has pioneered something that people often forget about. He is the first active NBA player that I'm aware of who also is paid to be a commentator on NBA basketball for TNT. Ooh. So he serves. He's got a contract with TNT, so you'll see him. When the Warriors, like if the Warriors are out of the, like if they don't make the playoffs or something like that, or at other key points in the year, you'll see Draymond Green on TNT as a paid commentator, along with Charles Barkley and Shaq, and those guys, on Inside the NBA. So the reason that they have him there is because, one, and this is always talked about and discussed, he's got a high basketball IQ. Mm-hmm. He really understands the game. Mm-hmm. He knows the game, and it shows in the way that he plays the game and his impact on the game. Yep. And then, two, he's a great talker. Yep. Now, you may not like what he's saying all the time or the way he says it, but the guy is a great talker.
Yeah.
So he brings a lot of value to the NBA, not just on the court. And by the way, he's got a $100 million 4-year contract with the Warriors, which speaks volumes. So, he brings a lot of value on the court, but then he also brings value to the industry that is professional basketball in the United States of America.
Yeah, very good points. One last question about the game itself, Dave. How you feeling about your Warriors this year, man?
Man, we struggling, man. We struggling, man. It's not looking good, baby. It's not looking good at all. And what's sad about it is Steph Curry is having a phenomenal season. I mean, he is taking that team and put it on his back, and they lose a lot of close games. They've been losing a lot of close games from what I've seen recently, and it's just sad. We're struggling, man. Klay Thompson is not having a great year. Wiggins has disappeared. Looney, is not as performing as well as he could be. Some of these younger cats are more of a bright spot, like Jonathan Kuminga. I think he's starting to step up a lot more, and there's a Eastern European cat whose name I can't remember right now, who's looking really good. But man, outside of Steph Curry, in terms of the starting 5, 6, and Chris Paul is not having the impact that we had hoped. So yeah, we struggling, man.
Yeah, tough year for the Warriors for sure.
Yes, it is.
Season's not over yet, but
no.
The Draymond Green thing going down, it just gets a little darker for sure.
Yes.
I want to ask you real quickly, too, about the in-season basketball tournament that took place, which I thought was really awesome. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I watched it. There were moments of inspiration, such as when the Knicks were playing. And, of course, with the expectation that the Knicks were probably not going to continue to play at some point. But what were your thoughts about the final outcome where the Lakers beat the Pacers last weekend in a pretty good game, at least for the Lakers?
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea that I wasn't sure when they first came up with this idea and they implemented it. But over time, I began to like it because what I was seeing was that it really seemed to create a game within the game that appealed to the players. And so you began to see more intensity with the players and the teams. And I think one thing that we saw was that LeBron James, I think it actually helped to showcase just how amazing a player he is, not just as a basketball player, but just as an athlete. I mean, what he's doing right now is tantamount to what what's his face Tom Brady was doing in football until, I guess his body just finally caught up with him, got the best of him. But what we saw LeBron James just rise, I mean, just phenomenally. That Lakers team has begun to gel, I think, a lot more. I think that in-season tournament has been good. I don't have any problem with the outcome, and I think it was good for the sport.
Yeah, I think it was good for the sport too, and I think that the NBA, of course, as dynamic as those games may be when we're watching them, always understands that it's competing against the NFL and that they're always looking for ways to get that little edge in terms of something to keep the viewers' attention and the fans' attention. So this was certainly an effort to try to do that. Keith, in this past week, there's been a lot of political news. We saw where the House has decided to move forward with a Biden impeachment inquiry. No secret, no surprise in that, I would imagine. We kind of knew that there was a lot of energy pushing towards that. We saw this past week 9 new indictments or 9 new charges against Hunter Biden, the president's son. 3 of those related to taxes and I should say 3 felonies and 6 misdemeanors, all related to taxes and in direct response to earnings that he is purportedly to have not accounted for. We know he still has the gun charge pending as well. The legal charges or the legal landscape for the Bidens is getting even murkier at this time. And I guess my question is, what potential does this have to further undermine the president's attempt at reelection?
Yeah, I think it has huge potential, simply because, people sometimes cannot understand that several things can be true at the same time. And as we look at the impeachment inquiry, or some may say inquiry, but as we look at the impeachment inquiry, we see that the Republicans have really looked at all the bad things that Hunter's doing and sort of pinned them on Daddy. Daddy must have known, even though the things that they're raising are things that happened, many things happened before he was even president. And so this whole notion of high crimes and misdemeanors, from someone who was a president in waiting, after his vice presidency, I don't know how that works, but I do think that people have a hard time separating, facts from propaganda, and they are going to look at what's being spun in the news. And it's very easy when you have, outlets like Fox and other right-wing talking points that will take the truth and turn it in a way that even those who are otherwise reasonable will start saying, well, I guess his dad must have known something about it. I wouldn't like to be Joe Biden at this point. And well, one reason I'll be a lot older, but the main reason is at the end of the day, he's a father. He is a father, and we spoke on this show about the way in which he kind of sided with his son, and we gave some reasons for it when it came to the paternity case, etc. And finally, after a while, he acknowledged his grandson, even though we really don't know what's going on behind closed doors, whether he had already acknowledged them. But at the end of the day, he is a father, and he doesn't want to see his son in jail, doesn't want to see his son get into trouble. But I think, it's actually, he's not really interfering in the process publicly. He tries to avoid any conversations about it, in a sense. And so I think whoever it is that's managing him, that's handling him, needs to ensure that whatever messaging is out there is one that lets people know, okay, yeah, Hunter has done this, that, and the other, but, Joe has done this, that, and the other. Two things can be true at the same time. How successful that's going to be, I don't know.
Did you say messaging? Well, we'll see what happens for sure. That track record has certainly been murky and gray up to now, but we'll see what happens. Fred, I wonder, most of us know, and this is almost like the elephant in the room, because everybody knows that this Joe Biden inquiry is a politically motivated thing. Everybody knows that. I mean, both sides know that. Even those that defend doing it know that it's being politically motivated. And yet you have former President Trump, who says that when he becomes president again, he's absolutely going after some people, which again reflects a politically motivated effort to do something. Is there some rational reason that can be given for me to understand why one is better than the other, or one is different than the other?
I hope my mic is working a little bit better. I switched mics. That sound better?
It
okay.
does.
Excellent. Okay. There are things that are within the realm of rational conduct. What we hope that our criminal justice system operates literally, and you see that, the blind lady with the scales and she's blindfolded. Now we know that the system has some issues. It's always had issues with race. It's always had a preference for the wealthy versus the poor. I mean, there are problems with our criminal justice system. We understand that, but in a situation where you're looking at politics, we've always hoped and believed that prosecutors would look with fairness upon facts that matter. And so you look at what's going on with President Trump, former President Trump. You have three different prosecutors and another attorney general who have brought charges against him, who have essentially, a lot of them in the case of being special prosecutors, have said that, hey, this wasn't a political thing. We simply are charging him with what we believe are crimes. I haven't seen any evidence that Joe Biden has committed a crime. We already know that Hunter Biden has a lot of issues. I mean, the guy was a drug addict, admittedly, an alcoholic, admittedly. I mean, he has some issues, and apparently did some things. This guy stood in front of a judge and tried to do a plea deal that fell apart. And so he even made some admissions that there's some things he did that he knew that were not correct. I haven't yet seen anything that ties that to the president. And so when politics tries to take a process that we would hope and believe has some rationality to it. In other words, I believe that if President Biden were found to have done something improper or wrong or illegal, then certainly that's fair play. But just trying to harm his election chances by going after his son, or pinning what his son has done on him. It's one thing, prosecute his son. I mean, that's, even though there's some question as to whether or not, if it were anybody other than Hunter Biden, would they really bring this series of tax charges against him? There's some question there. But even let's assume we can get past that. Charging him is not the same as charging the president, and any sort of political spin that suggests otherwise is simply something that I hope voters are smart enough to recognize. But I want to get back to just one last thing, Kenny, because you said this The last time I was on this show, I think I've heard you say it numerous times. When I'm not on the show, I've heard you say it over and over again. And you just said it tonight, messaging. The Democrats really need to do much better job letting the American people know the tremendous success that President Biden has had. He's done some great things. And you don't hear about it. You don't hear about it. I mean, you have to literally be very astute, paying attention to know all the things that he's accomplished. And so messaging is really the key. And I think messaging would make it clear that, hey, this is really what I've done. And this other thing about my son, who we already know this is one of the most compassionate presidents to ever sit in the Oval Office. And so, of course, he loves his son. Of course, he's going to support his son. Of course, he's going to, continue to love his son. That doesn't make him guilty of anything, though.
Yeah.
So I hope it doesn't have the political impact that, I'm well aware. I mean, Dr. Burton, like you said, I mean, it's very possible that it could have a political impact. I hope the American people are a little more sophisticated. Maybe COVID did something to us all collectively where our political sophistication level is a little bit higher. Maybe. I don't know. I certainly hope so.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely look and see. It's interesting. Go ahead and mute, Fred. It's interesting that the couple of things you said on the messaging, I'm just going to highlight because just in this past week, I've seen where gas prices have fallen. I've seen where interest rates have now been cut for the first time in a long time, which gives some hope to forward momentum, which of course ties directly into home buying and other kinds of things that matter to people. And then I also saw where the jobs numbers, the jobs reports have continued to remain consistently high. But yet I keep hearing conversations about infrastructure and building bridges and roads and things of that nature. And I'm telling you, every time, I said this before, and I still think that this should happen. Every time a person's student loans are cleared, they should do a commercial with that person. Every time it happens. They should have a commercial with Keith. Every time it happens, they need to have this ordinary experience of regular people who are benefiting from decisions made by the Biden administration regarding things that impact people's lives. And that's just not happening. The high-level conversations that are going on about this, that, and the other, yes, he gets credit for those things, but it doesn't translate to what people are dealing with on a daily basis. Dave, I want to ask you this question. It was famously or infamously stated by the former president recently that he would be dictator for a day if he were to be reelected, which I think should be, if that doesn't make a person's blood curl, then I don't know what should or what could. It is amazing. I've seen people rationalizing away the fact that he said this. I've seen people say things like, oh, well, he always says stuff and we can't really take him seriously. We had 4 years of that same kind of banter where we saw a literal uprising, insurrection at the Capitol that was fueled by the president's words. What were your thoughts when you heard this comment about the former president talking about, well, I'll be a dictator for a day, when everybody already knows in his mind that he thinks about himself as a dictator 24 hours a day?
Yeah, it's very clear when you listen to the kinds of conversations that were not only being had while he was still in office in those final days, but since he's left office, things that he said, things that people around him have said, it's very clear that he has an authoritarian mindset. That's indisputable. So, when you hear something like that, I think our natural tendency, because we have been literally inundated with, outrageous comments and actions from the previous president or by the previous president, I think it's real easy to just do what you said, just to say, okay, well, there's Trump being Trump. And that's unfortunate that we've been desensitized. I think as a nation we have been. And so we just kind of put him in a special category where we, those of us who oppose him just tend to, I think, just say, okay, there he is, acting a fool again. and then people that support him, they just sort of, they tend to, I think, coddle him and sympathize with him, and and just say, sort of downplay it. You don't have to take him seriously, is I think the way many of them feel. But I'm with you. I think we should be outraged every time it happens. I think really and truly, the Democratic Party is long overdue in taking those statements. That clip from that interview with Sean Hannity where he said that, and turning it into a commercial that they ought to be running on a regular basis. In fact, one commentator has gone as far as to say, is that comment and all that it represents and implies should be juxtaposed with something like the old commercial that I think what I want to say, was it LBJ who ran the commercial where or was it Eisenhower? I can't remember, but it was some 40, 50, 60 years ago, 70 years ago, where the implication was you either vote for me and you have a reasonable outcome, or you vote for the other person and we're going to be in a nuclear war, basically. And I think it's almost, I would argue that it's time for that same sort of approach. They ought to be hammering home that if Trump gets back in office, I don't care if you're a conservative or a liberal or Democrat or Republican, the nature, the culture of politics is going to dramatically change. The actions of government are going to change. And it's not because we're projecting this onto him. It's because of what he has told us himself.
Yeah, that's right. He's not hiding it. And it's right out there in front of us. It's something that those who support him will have to own as well. Yep. And if we're talking about the eroding of these democratic values that we celebrated for so long, that emerged out of the American Revolution and other kinds of things that have happened since then, are now in danger of being reversed and neutralized as a consequence of this. And those that stand proud as Americans should be irate about this.
Yep.
They should be pushing back against these kinds of things. I'm looking at my time here, and it looks like I got to make a short transition, so I'm going to introduce this next topic, Keith. I want you to start out by telling me about the fact that I think that Rudolph Giuliani is going to forever think about these words in a very different way than he probably did before last Friday. More money, more money, more money. $148 million judgment against Rudy the Gent. I call him Rudy the Gent. I'm sorry. I'm supposed to hold it together as the host. Against Rudy the Gent. And he has been ordered to pay this $148 million to two former Georgia poll workers who he has defamed. That's what the verdict is. And so now these two women, let me call their names, by the way, because I think that that's important. Wandrea Shea Moss and her mother, Ruby Freeman, who many of us saw time and time again, interviewed on television, talking about that they're living in fear, that they're being terrorized, that they're castigated because of their role as poll workers. They are now standing in the winner's circle, $148 million. I want to start out right there, right after this short transition. Tell us what your thoughts are about this verdict and what it perhaps suggests moving forward. And I'll do that in just a moment. The broadcast is Second Chance. I'm Kenny Anderson. I'm talking this afternoon with some really bright fellows, and I'm always glad to be in their presence because when they show up, then I get a little bit more educated than I was before the conversation started. I'll be back in just a moment with more of the broadcast. I'm Kenny Anderson. It's Second Chance, and I hope that you're having an absolutely fantastic and amazing afternoon.
Why do we say praise 90.1 FM? Because the blessing is in the praise.
Jesus, I praise your name forever. it's gonna bring. Don't you worry about it. It'll be all over in the morning. There's a praise on the inside. I can't keep it to
Filling your day with songs of praise. We're Praise 90.1 FM.
Welcome back to the broadcast, Second Chance. I'm Kenny Anderson, talking this afternoon with David Person, Dr. Keith Burton, Dr. Frederick Greene. Honor and privilege to talk with them as we're talking about a number of different things that are happening in the world today. Just before the break, I mentioned the fact that Rudolph Giuliani is now in debt for $148 million to two individuals who he has been found guilty of defaming, and wanted to know what Keith thought about that. Dr. Burton?
Yeah, and so we see justice, kinda. I always say that, particularly those with deep pockets, whether it be a Giuliani, a Musk, Trump, when they're sued for defamation, for putting people in harm's danger, etc., when they're sued for things like this, if it's a civil case and there's a judgment against them, it should be a judgment that makes them feel it. Now, we know, I shouldn't say we know, according to some public records, Giuliani's net worth is around 50 million, and so this will definitely break him. In fact, his attorneys were saying, what's he going to do? Join the rest of us, but I think this is a victory, but I think in many ways it's a symbolic victory, because as we see with what's the guy from InfoWars, Alec Jones?
Yeah.
As we see with Jones, he hasn't paid a dime yet. He hasn't paid out a dime, even though his expense account is, oh goodness, they say he's spending about $80,000 a month on dinners and the whole nine. But all those parents that he maligned, those parents who were doubly victimized, haven't got a single dime, and because he has everything hidden in offshore accounts and everything else, and so I see it as a symbolic victory, and I would hope that there is a way for the two ladies to get something, but I'm afraid that they may not see a dime of the 148 mil. Even if it's 10% of it, I doubt they're going to see anything. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. And of course, there are others who are lined up. There are others who are lined up and are saying, okay, they won. Let's see if we can have our day in court, And so I think in one way, and it's a shame this has to happen in civil settings, but in one way, it kind of sheds a little light on this whole notion that no one is above the law. But again, if people who have obvious wealth are able to find ways to hide it, to file bankruptcy, to do this, that, and the other, then in many ways, again, the victory is symbolic. And I think it's only going to mean something, when he's living in one of those New York public housing, complexes.
Fred, it's interesting because we often see these kinds of judgments being made. Keith referenced the Alex Jones verdict, and of course now we got the Rudy Giuliani verdict. We often see verdicts where the value of the verdict goes well beyond the person's ability to be able to pay for it when we're talking about punitive damages, et cetera, et cetera. Is there a general sense, I'm not talking about specifically about a specific case, but generally, what are there options available to the person, like these two ladies, if for some reason we get 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line and Rudy still has not been able to pay?
No, I don't know of any options outside of insurance that he may have. If he had liability insurance for defamation or some sort of, some of the acts that he committed. Going after, I would hope, and this is just hoping for them, that his affairs aren't as tightly arranged as you were saying, as Alex Jones, or not Alex Jones, I'm referring to, his name escapes me, but the broadcaster who's hasn't paid any of the judgment for the families of the children who were shot.
Yeah, that's Alex Jones.
It is Alex. Okay, yeah, Alex Jones. For some reason I didn't think it was Alex, but right. Okay, so to that extent, you go back and I hate to bring him up, but OJ was able to keep a huge amount of his assets protected under retirement laws, ERISA, et cetera, that kept those assets from being attached. So there is a way where you can arrange your affairs in a manner that makes it hard to execute a judgment against you. But I would hope that you'll find that there may be a way to collect whatever the final judgment. I say that because I'm pretty sure there will be an appeal, and not only an appeal, that'll take a number of years. And so what the final judgment actually looks like is a whole nother issue. It might be less. It could be the same. It's probably going to be less. You'll probably see some adjustments on appeal. Yeah. But I can only hope for them that there will be some assets of his that are still attachable. And that's really the word you want. You want to be able to attach real estate. You want to be able to attach income. You want to be able to attach bank accounts, whatever the case may be, whatever assets that are not protected that can be attached with court process.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, needless to say, oftentimes these things that just kind of look like they're black and white on the surface, somebody does something wrong, somebody gets sued, a verdict is levied against them, and the outcome is not what people might think it is. It's a very complicated matter, complicated structure, lots of layers sometimes that emerge from these things that people have to consider. Dave, Liz McGill, the former president of the University of Pennsylvania, was one of 3 college presidents who testified on Capitol Hill about free speech on their campuses in the context of the war of Israel against Gaza. And, of course, Liz was a casualty of that because of her testimony during that time. We see the president of both MIT and the president of Harvard, first African-American female president of Harvard, have survived thus far with support from their board as well as some of the champions of the institutions. A lot of saber rattling from some philanthropists who have given significant amounts of money to these institutions, who are still, raising their voice. But right now, it seems like people like the president of Harvard, Claudine Gay, has survived. Your thoughts about her survival in the midst of this tempest?
Well, I'm glad that she survived, and I think she employed the right strategy in that she went on as I understand it, she went on what I would call, and I guess this is a colloquial way of saying it, sort of an apology tour. She did some interviews and clarified her statements. It's a tricky thing in this country when you start talking about Israel and Israel's historic, the history of Israel and the conflict, the historic conflict over there with Israel and the Palestinians and the other Arab nations at times as well have been involved directly in that. I mean, it gets kind of tricky, and so I know that there is and the Biden administration, I think, has been trying to do this. You have to sort of walk a fine line if you're a reasonable person, in my opinion, if you're a reasonable person, you have to walk a fine line and say unequivocally what Hamas did in terms of initiating this brutal attack was wrong. There's no question it was wrong. But at the same time, you have to say the historic treatment of the Palestinian people by the nation of Israel has been wrong, and it's been brutal. So, trying to find a balance and a way to communicate two competing ideas around which there's a lot of emotion, and understandably so. It's tricky, and not everybody is, I guess I'll just say, has the communicative skills or the presence of mind to pull that off. But I think to me, that's the challenge, and that's what, if you're going to be a reasonably intellectually honest person, I think you have to say both.
Keith, we've seen what David just suggested with President Biden, for example, who seems to have entered a new phase of his efforts to really sort of define the position of the United States as it relates to this conflict that continues to escalate with savagery and just terrible loss of life. Almost, I think, 20,000 Palestinians dead now, and no end in sight, as it has been announced that this operation will probably go on for another 4 to 6 months, is what people are saying right now. This is a very delicate dance and a delicate walk, and the president is learning that as they're calling for some restraint as it relates to the bombing. There have been some allegations of indiscriminate bombing that have been pushed back against, and people said, no, there has not been indiscriminate bombing. President Biden is really getting a sense of this whole balance that David was talking about that needs to be achieved, and it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, I'm looking at this and seeing a little historical deja vu, and I'm thinking about the U.S. support of the apartheid government in South Africa, and the labeling the ANC as a terrorist organization because the ANC did get, militant, and they did do some operations, and they did have a number of personnel who were being trained in Angola and some other places, being trained by Cuba and others, in these areas. And so I see a lot of deja vu. I would even go back far and seeing historical deja vu and go into the founding of America. As I mentioned on this show, I think it was last month, when we look at the government of Israel, it's basically a European government or European birth government. And when I say that, and I challenge everyone again to look at those who have led Israel from its inception from 1948. There have been 14 prime ministers, 11 presidents, the first 6 prime ministers, all born in Europe, the first 4 presidents, all born in Europe. Everyone since then, their parents are born in Europe. The current prime minister, his father is Polish, his mother's parents were Lithuanian. And so when we look at the stance of America officially, it is a stance that is true to the historical position of America, being colonizers, supporting imperialist governments, etc. And so I see the political tightrope walking in all this, and I understand why Dr. Gay and others, are sort of walking this tightrope. But at the end of the day, as one who doesn't have to, hold my tongue, I am going to call this what it is. It is European imperialism, and you have people who have been in that land for centuries being displaced by a new people, by a new European government. And I listened to a sermon yesterday, and I'm not going to tell you where I was or anything else because you may know who did the sermon. But the pastor mentioned something about David and Goliath, and when Goliath was a Philistine, Palestinian, he beat the Palestinian, or the Israelites walking around Jericho when they were supposed to destroy all of the small cities. But one of the cities that they spared was Gaza. And he said, and you see what's happening today? And so just drawing this thing, and I'm saying this is dangerous. This is very, very dangerous, because if we don't look at this as a recent event, this is not ancient history. This is not ancient history. And we're seeing a colonizing effort in real time. There are many people who were alive when the state of Israel was formed back in 1948 who are still alive. There are people that, if you think about those who were kidnapped by Hamas And you hear, oh, so-and-so, they're citizens of Australia, citizens of Ireland. By the way, the current president, his parents are from Ireland. The current president of Israel, his parents are from Ireland, right? And and if you think about it, you have citizenship in a state where if my mother claimed Judaism, and she could have, I guess, because she has Ashkenazi genes, does that mean I could automatically go there and tell the Palestinians you don't belong? There's an issue there. And so when we look at the tightrope that has to be walked, I can understand it from a political perspective, but at the end of the day, as people like Muhammad Ali, Nelson Mandela, and a host of others have said, what's taken place there is apartheid, and we need to recognize that when Joe Biden and others support the state of Israel, giving them the billions of dollars, they are supporting apartheid. There are no two ways about it. And I've always encouraged people, show me how I'm reading history wrong, because the facts are there. The facts are there.
Fred, Kevin McCarthy has announced that he's going to leave Congress by the end of the year. Probably the worst kept secret. People know that he's been smarting since he was elected as the House leader. But then when he was removed as the House leader, and there were all those initial rumors about he was going to leave, and he kind of came out and quelled those rumors, saying that he was not going to. It almost seemed inevitable that the wind had been taken out of his sails, and there was really no place for him left in that process. The Democrats certainly were not supporting him, and so many of his House colleagues had turned their backs on him. What will Kevin McCarthy's legacy be?
That's a hard question, Kenny. If we look at just factually, the only Speaker of the House to ever be removed after being elected Speaker of the House. So that's an interesting legacy. Someone who could not hold the job for quite a year, made it, 8.5, almost 9 months, something like that. Someone who took 15 votes to get the job. I don't know what his total legacy would be. I think that, he's serving in an interesting time with the Republican Party where it's so fragmented, and you have this extreme MAGA group to the right that makes it almost impossible to reach any sort of reasonable legislation. I mean, when you have divided government, something has to get past the Senate, and you don't have enough votes in the House on your own to get it done. So it means you're going to have to compromise with the Democrats to actually get anything done that's going to make it past the Senate and make it to the president and get signed. So I think he has an interesting place in history. I mean, he has that Guinness Book of World Record, who's the only Speaker of the House in the United States to ever be removed from the speakership by a vote of the House. That's clearly, that's the headline, I think. After that, I think he's probably done some things as a congressperson that people who like what he advocated for will say he was effective. One of the greatest fundraisers to, ever serve as a speaker. Tremendous fundraising capabilities. But if you don't like the things that he stood for, you obviously don't like him from that standpoint. So it's kind of a bifurcated. I really want to go back to that last question, but you moved on, so I'm going to stay with the hosts here. I'll stay with.
No, go right ahead. If you want to comment on that, that's fine.
Well, I just want to say this. I don't disagree with anything anybody said. I think, though, that there's two things. Kenny, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said you have to start every conversation with saying what happened on October 7th when the attack was made was just wrong, period. The way it happened, it was just wrong. It was terrorism. It was wrong. I think that. And if you try to compare possibly the Palestinian Authority over in the West Bank and who used to control Gaza over in the West Bank, if you try to make the comparison between them and maybe the ANC in South Africa, that's a little better comparison. Hamas, though, and the reason I say is ANC never called for the elimination of all of the white people of South Africa. As a matter of fact, when Nelson Mandela came out, the reason why they were able to make him president is because he wanted peace and he wanted for them to live and cooperate together. And so when you have an organization that swears that they're going to eliminate Israel as a country, because I think we're at a point in the world where we have to recognize that Israel has a right to exist, but we also, as you've indicated, Palestinians have a right to a homeland. They have a right to exist and a right to integrity. And the last thing I want to say is I agree with all the comments. You know, Jimmy Carter is the first president, or we said it as a former president, but the first person of that stature to say that what's happening there is essentially apartheid. That's exactly what it is. And so we have to recognize that, and we have to recognize that it's wrong. But I don't know that, I think we still do need to recognize what happened on the 7th was wrong. We have to call it for what it is. That attack was wrong. It was vicious. It was wrong. It wasn't called for. And if you look at the 20,000 lives that are now lost, it really started an unfortunate series of events that it's brought us to where we are. And I don't think we're in a better place now than what we were in September, for example.
Yeah, no, I don't think we are, Dr. Greene, but I do feel that we do need to look at things in context. As Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, said, and of course Israel is upset with him. And when we look at things in its context, if we look at the history of Hamas, Hamas became more militant. Hamas was not a militant group. And when we look at the history of the ANC actually tempered down after a while. You know, and so when I listened to Katie Tur this week, for instance, speaking about the need to totally eradicate Hamas, I thought about her covering an ANC quote unquote terrorist attack that would have taken place back in the 50s, and she'd have been saying the very same thing. And so, no, I don't condone what happened at all, but it didn't happen in a vacuum. It didn't happen in a vacuum at all. And I think that's where the United Nations Secretary General got it right. And I'm glad he did not back down. Of course, he is not a president of a university. He doesn't have to walk that tight line. But I am so glad that he's willing to speak truth to Israel, because the reality is Israel's right to exist is a right that was gained by a decision by the United Nations in 1947 to create a state within a state that was based on the principle of apartheid. And so they're right. If we go to the very beginning of the conception of the state of Israel, that was conceived by an America that had apartheid in its land, and by France that was colonizing half of Africa, etc. You know, we understand why it exists and the right to exist. When we talk about the right to exist, and I'm not at all advocating any type of terrorist act or anything else to obliterate Israel. I personally believe there should be a one-state solution, a democratic state solution. But we have to understand that what we saw happening in real time is apartheid, and we have this is recent history. This is recent history, and you know, it's complicated in one sense. Okay, use that
That's
word.
the word I always use, right? I always use that word because it is in many ways.
It's complicated, but I do think that the facts, to understand the facts, are simple, and it's complicated in that we at right now, I don't think any of us wants to see violence.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's also my contention about the complication oftentimes, Keith, is because of the simplicity that many people bring to the conversation. And it's just not a simple conversation. Even if the historical record is there, my suggestion is that people don't know or understand the historical record. And just for attribution's sake, it was Dave that first suggested that they should be, that we should call out the viciousness of the October 7th attack, even though it sounded good when you said I said it, but I want to make sure
I want to
make sure Dave gets attribution on that.
Thanks, brother.
You got it. Hey, did any of y'all see, now y'all let me down the last time. I'm going to see what happens this time. Did any of y'all watch the last GOP debate? Anybody? I mean, David, for heaven's sake, brother, it took place just 90 miles away from where you and I live.
It's a joke.
Keith,
it's a joke.
It took place in the state that you lived, that you called home for so many years. Fred, it's the state that you currently call home.
It's
It's
a
just
joke,
90
man.
miles from where we live, guys.
It's a joke. It's
Yeah,
a joke. I mean, it's hard. First of all, it's a joke because the guy that's the front runner is not even participating. So you got four, what I think is four people now that are competing for what, second place, and a distant second place at that. And so it's a joke for that reason. I think it's a joke also because when you start looking at in my mind, you've only really got two credible candidates left in my mind, and that's Chris Christie, and he's only credible because he's the only one that consistently calls out Trump for being the atrocious candidate and person that he is, and former president that he was. And then Nikki Haley, who is credible not because she's, in my mind, particularly strong on the issues, but because she, I think, clearly has slowly and I'll say with some political savvy become a somewhat of a formidable candidate. Again within the strange twilight zone that they're operating in. But I mean, what's the point, Kenny? It's just a joke.
Well,
No, actually, Kenny, when you said the Dead Body Watch, I kind of got excited because I thought you were going to be talking about the new movie with Julia Roberts and Mahershala Ali.
Oh, no.
leave the world behind.
No.
But actually, we're talking about the same thing because these are folk who want to leave the world behind, who want to lead us into this sort of dystopian, society. What have you? But no, I sometimes will go back and watch the highlights, But again, my blood pressure, man. I got to watch. It is difficult.
He's got to watch his blood pressure. I got to watch my cussing quotient.
Right.
So I'm trying to reduce the amount of profanity that I use in a given day. So. I know I'd go way over if I watched. So I just
a lot of vulnerabilities out there, guys.
Yeah,
I get it. But listen, let me just say this: that Vivek Ramaswamy is one scary guy. Not going anywhere in this race, but he's one scary guy. I'm just going to share some of the stuff that he vocalized in the course of this debate. It was absolutely terrifying. I know, Keith. You just either you're celebrating or something joyful going on. We appreciate the balloons. But he said transgenderism is a mental disorder. He said if China attacks Taiwan, the U.S. should go in immediately militarily. He said January 6th was an inside job. He reiterated the fact that he believes the 2020 election was stolen. He said the climate change agenda is a hoax. He kept making multiple deep state references. I mean, this guy talked about as dark a society as there can be, and he spoke with no sense of any kind of hope, no sense of optimism. And I'm not saying he denied reality of certain difficult challenges and situations, but some of the things that he said were flat out frightening to hear from a person who's running for office.
Well, Kenny, I think he is auditioning for the vice presidency. That's scary. That's what's going on with him. So he's, back in the day, we used to use this term called brown nosing, and I won't get into the details of what that alludes to, but those who know, and those who don't, look it up in Urban Dictionary or whatever. But that's what he's doing. He's brown nosing. He is he's auditioning for the vice presidency. He doesn't criticize Trump. He mirrors Trump's positions, or even maybe goes even further, because I don't think Trump has ever called transgenderism a mental illness, to my knowledge. But most of what else you shared, I think, is pretty much straight out of the Trump playbook. So that's what he's trying to do, and you know what? He may be successful in that.
Well,
He may be successful in that because the Republican, at least in my opinion, the Republican mindset seems to be they love it if they can get a black or a brown person to, and I'm talking about right-wing conservative Republicans now. They seem to love it when a black or brown person mirrors their points of view. It validates, I think, the misogyny, the racism, the sexism that often emanates from that party, and and their and it seems to be embedded in their platform. So you got somebody like that guy Ramaswamy saying what he's saying. I think it would give a lot of comfort to folks, who want to vote that way.
34 years ago, a man named Charles Stuart, made a 911 call saying that he and his wife, his pregnant wife, had been shot in Boston in what was known as the Mission Hill District, which was a urban part of the city. There is a phenomenal documentary on HBO that I've been watching. It's called Murder in Boston, Rage, Rampage, and Reckoning. And it concludes tomorrow night. It's a 3-part HBO series. I don't know if you're listening out there, if you've seen it, but if you haven't seen it, I would strongly and highly recommend that you watch this. What they've done is they've tied this horrific story of a man who accused a black person of shooting his pregnant wife when in reality he shot her and then shot himself, and created this exclusive search for a black man wearing an Adidas jumpsuit that turned the neighborhood upside down, led to multiple arrests, multiple charges, multiple people under suspicion. A lot of the stop and frisk stuff that became infamous in New York years later was happening at that time, as well as the fact that, this man was preying on one of the most vicious stereotypes that has ever been used. The idea that a black man would shoot this woman. And they interviewed people who were involved in the story, some people who were questioned by the police, some people who were community advocates, some people who were just teenagers at the time who remember that story. And they talked to other city leaders, and they talked against the background of Mayor Flynn, who was the mayor at that time. And they talk a little bit about his history, but they also tie in the dubious process of busing that began in the early 70s in Boston, and kind of trace a thread through that decision and some of the racial tensions to this situation that took place in 1989 in Boston, some 34 years ago. I'm sure that most of you guys remember that story. Dave, you're a journalist. You remember that story. Fred, you're in the legal world. I'm sure you remember that story. What strikes me about this documentary, which is a very good documentary, by the way, I said that already, but I got to stress that one more time. What strikes me about it is that the playbook that was used 34 years ago, as it was used on that day, was the same playbook that had probably been used 34 years before that. But 34 years later, that playbook is still being used, where the person being accused of the crime is this black person who committed the crime. Dave, your thoughts about the Charles Stuart case, very famous case in Boston. And by the way, Charles Stuart ended up committing suicide. His brother was implicated in the situation as an accessory after the fact. It's just a real complex situation that had so many layers in it, but all united in the context of racial tensions and racial issues.
Well, one thing we know from history is that being black in America has often been fraught with peril. And one of the things that we have always been at risk of is being falsely accused of crimes that either were never committed or that some white person committed, or to cover up some action that a white person did not want discovered. You can, here in Alabama, the Scottsboro Boys, great example. of the demonizing of innocent Black people in order to cover up something else. The murder of Emmett Till, another example of demonizing a Black child and leading to that Black child's lynching in order to cover up something else. The movie Rosewood by John Singleton, which is a brilliant movie about the real life destruction of that all Black town by a neighboring white town, was at least in part. Now, I don't know if this is historically true or not, but the movie suggests that that whole incident was in part based on false information that came from a white woman about a Black man that she was having an affair with, a sexual liaison with, and then she cried rape. I mean, this is something that we know to be true. So, when I hear about these situations, I mean, it disgusts me, it angers me, but I realize that it's a tried and true tactic that unfortunately far too many white people have come to rely on. And I thank God for those white people who have not done it and who would never do it. But again, far too many exist who have and who will.
Yeah. Fred, one of the most striking elements of this documentary is an interview with one of the police officers who had gained a reputation in the Black community for kicking butt. And people kind of knew who he was. He had a name in the community. They kind of knew when he came on the scene, he was going to take care of business regardless of what the circumstances were, regardless of what the law was. And so they're interviewing this guy, and he actually says some quite disparaging things, even in this interview, that suggests that he is the person that a lot of people suggest that he was. I remember the Charles Stuart case just like it was yesterday in many ways, because it was so profoundly terrible that this pregnant woman had been shot and her husband had been shot. Now, she did not survive. The baby did not survive. It's just a terrible story. And then the subsequent matter of trying to find out who did it and the upturning of the Black community as a consequence of that, only to find out that it was her husband who set the whole thing up. I remember how mad I was about that. I remember how angry I was about that. Very much like some of the many cases that we've seen since then in which that same energy can be applied. Those same emotions are still felt. And it's really kind of tragic to me that in 2023, that not only we're reminded about this event that took place 34 years ago, but these things are still taking place. Thoughts about the Charles Stuart case?
Yeah, I agree. I haven't seen the movie or have not watching the HBO series, but I do remember the Stewart case. It reminds me of Central Park 5. I mean, we can add that too. We've talked about that. It reminds me of so many situations. Reminds me of the lady in North Carolina who drove her two sons. She's now up for parole, but drove her two sons. I forgot her name, but drove her two sons into the lake.
Susan somebody.
Right. Drove her two sons into the lake, claimed that, it was a Black guy that did it. And, turns out she did it. So, yeah, we see that. And, it's an unfortunate legacy that we still have, racism and this racial history that, as you said, makes it very harmful for African Americans in so many ways, where we can be charged with crimes that we did not commit, or people can use us as a scapegoat for crimes that they did commit. And so I don't know what else can be said other than the fact that, there's a lot of people that need their hearts fixed. There's a lot of people that need, heart surgery. And I say that term meaning that they need a new mindset. They need to see things a little differently. And I don't know. From a spiritual standpoint, I'll defer to Dr. Burton, but I think Christ is the one who, the Holy Spirit is the one that renews our mind and gives us a new mind. But I would say that it's unfortunate that we're still seeing that even today. as recently as a few years ago. Let me just say this, that particular case, I think the irony of it is that there were actually two police officers. We go back and remember, there were a couple of police officers who did not believe him when he told his story initially, because it seemed incredible, the story that he told. And they were just kind of put off. I don't know if they're showing that in the movie or not, but there were a couple of officers, or a couple of detectives, I guess it was, who, when they initially heard the story, they didn't believe it, but their superiors told them, hey, you be quiet. This is, we're going in this direction. So there was some evidence right up front that what he was saying was false.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because one of the biggest points of evidence that I pointed to was the location in which this occurred, and how unlikely it would have been for even a community that had been stereotyped in a certain kind of way, for anybody to do something like this and think they can get away with it, that it'd be okay. They can move on with this process. That they talked about, there was a code of the street, even that, people might rob, people might bang, people might do different kinds of things out there, but nobody was going to kill a pregnant white woman in a majority black neighborhood. It just didn't make sense. And to your point, Fred, there is a police officer that talks about that discomforting feeling about this just doesn't add up. And their voices were kind of suppressed in that process.
By the way, that was Susan Smith.
Yes, Susan Smith. And remember her tearful interviews without tears, talking about her boys and all she wanted to do was be with her man. And that was just a horrific situation once again. Speaking of horrific situations, Sean Diddy Combs is once again in the news for all the wrong reasons. 3 sexual assault lawsuits were filed against Sean Diddy Combs in the past month. A woman who was unnamed in the complaint alleges Combs and 2 other men gang raped her in New York in 2003 when she was just 17 years old, and Combs was 34. The lawsuit was filed this past Wednesday in Manhattan, and the woman says she met the 2 men at a lounge in the Detroit area, and they took her to a recording studio in New York via private plane. Now, Keith, a person is innocent until proven guilty, and the court of public opinion is definitely in effect today, as many people are talking and speculating in much the same way that people did about the R. Kelly situation, even though R. Kelly's justice came many, many years later. There's always been this sort of shadow around P. Diddy for one reason or another. There was a shadow around him because of Tupac. There was a shadow around him because of the Biggie murder. There's always been this shadow of sort of like P. Diddy really being a gangster and living a gangster life on the DL, with all the success that he's had in the music industry as well. This is a very disturbing story. Innocent till proven guilty, but disturbing story yet the same. I'm sure you would agree.
Yeah, absolutely. But of course, we see his recent settlement with, I guess, the first, you could say, successful charge was at Casa Ventura. And we don't know how much that was, but of course, I think it emboldened these other 2. And one of them says there's actually a tape out there. So it's possible that yes, everyone is innocent until proven guilty, but there seems to be a lot of smoke here. There seems to be a lot of smoke, and I can't help but think about the statement that Donald Trump made when he spoke about how wealthy people get away with stuff, particularly the way in which they treat women. And thinking that, it's easy to believe. Of course, we don't know what happened. Only those who didn't know what happened. And, if evidence comes out in trial, or I suspect that he'll probably settle these other 2 also, especially if there's some truth to it. I believe that he'll settle it in that way. There'd always be a cloud because he could always say, well, I didn't say I did it, but it was easy to do it, etc. But it really doesn't look good. Incidentally, his nickname came from his temper. He was actually, he's from New York, but really from Mount Vernon, sort of a middle class type thing, right? And his nickname is because he used to huff and puff. when he got angry, that's how we got his nickname. And so when you hear about these violent crimes, I wonder how those who knew him when he was younger, when he couldn't really control his temper, are taking it, whether they'll give him the benefit of the doubt or they'll say, that sounds like something he'd do. But again, we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah, not that he's listening to the show today, but being from Mount Vernon absolutely disqualifies him as a legitimate New Yorker anyway. So, with all due respect to my friends from Mount Vernon, by the way.
I got lots of family in Mount Vernon. They may.
Only a New Yorker would care about that. But let me say this, though, regardless of whether or not Puff or Diddy or whatever he's going by nowadays is a legitimate New Yorker or not, the word on the street for years has been that he's a predator, not just of women, but there's been there's a really I won't say the star's name because I don't know if it's true or not, but there is a very well-known, I guess at this point in time, legendary OG kind of R&B star who's a male who reportedly, according to some stories, was forced by Sean Combs was coerced into a sexual act as a way to humiliate this guy. There's speculation about Sean Combs and a very prominent young star that he was a mentor of at one time, or maybe not a mentor of, but had some kind of connection to. And there's been speculation about that. So the word on the street has really been bad about him, just in general, when it comes to predatory behavior.
Well, he says, for the record, and I definitely want to quote him, he says, "Enough is enough. For the last couple of weeks, I've sat silently and watched people try to assassinate my character, destroy my reputation and my legacy. Sickening allegations have been made against me by individuals looking for a quick payday. Let me be absolutely clear. I did not do any of the awful things being alleged. I will fight for my name, my family, and the truth, and I wish him best in his fight. And hope that if justice is required, that justice will prevail in these matters that he has found himself entangled in." Just shocking, several rest in peace stories this past week, but just shocked by the death of Andre Baugher this past week, one of my favorite actors. First discovered him in the show Homicide, which I thought was just an incredible performance. Of course, he won an Emmy Award for that. I was like a big fan of Homicide. I was sick when they took it off TV because I thought it was just a brilliant series. And it was gritty. It was realistic. It was well written. And the actors and characters were just so well crafted and thought out. But Andre played in that. He also starred in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which I was kind of in and out on. I didn't follow him as much there. But the funny thing about that role was that we had been so used to seeing him in his dramatic roles that he took kind of a comedic turn in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And I have seen a number of the shows, and he is absolutely hilarious with his kind of deadpan humor and his brilliant acting. Dave, I actually sent you a text when I found out about this because I said, I know you know this, and you may not know he passed, but you need to know he passed. Age 61, reportedly from lung cancer.
Yeah, just brilliant. Like you, I was a big fan of Homicide: Life on the Street. In fact, I would argue that show, the creation and the execution of that show opened the door for shows like The Wire on HBO. I mean, it laid the foundation for that, I think. Andre Braugher is one of those actors who I would dare say I never saw him in anything where he didn't have impact and sort of radiate from the screen. Even some of his TV appearances, guest appearances on Law and Order. I think it was Law and Order Special Victims Unit, I think. He just radiated something. He was an interesting actor. I remember hearing an interview that he did. I want to say it was with Terry Gross on Fresh Air some years ago, and he talked about how he would recite his lines, and he had some kind of methodology that involved sort of a certain way he would breathe and a certain way he would read the lines and embody them in order to regurgitate them. That just really sounded very unique, uniquely cerebral. And it kind of made me look at his portrayals differently, because of that. And one thing you can say, again, he was just compelling. Whether he was doing comedy, whether he was doing drama, he was a compelling actor.
Yeah, just, that kind of thing that comes to mind when I think about Andre Braugher is the old concept of method acting and some of the actors that just took their craft very seriously, tried to understand the character and interpret that character in the most powerful and effective way. He's just, like I said, Homicide: Life on the Street, definitely worth watching reruns of that because he was absolutely phenomenal in that, and just kind of a must-see TV thing. Iconic TV and movie producer Norman Lear passed at the age of 101. The significance of Norman Lear, of course, is all of these shows that he was either responsible for creating or had some role in actually producing and developing, and the list goes on, going all the way back to 1971 with All in the Family, followed by Maude, followed by Sanford and Sons, Good Times, Jeffersons, One Day at a Time, Different Strokes. All brilliant shows, all impactful shows, all shows that even to this day I can sit down and watch and be perfectly happy with that. Keith, when you see a legacy like this, Norman Lear, who tackled some really heavy topics and introduced some characters who were not necessarily anticipated to be seen on TV shows in that day and time. Your thoughts about the legacy of producer Norman Lear?
Yeah, definitely an activist, in the sense of championing the inclusion of stories on TV that normally would not be told. Now, of course, it was not without controversy, because we know why John Amos left Good Times, so it was not without controversy, and whether that was his problem or the problem with the writing room, that's that could in itself be debated. But the fact that he did open the door, and again, these are shows that we all watched and we probably all watch, because every now and then I do binge, Good Times or one of the others, every now and then I do that, and of course I look at the fact that, okay, we see sort of the stereotypical Cabrini Green, black family setup sort of thing, but then we also see who was the young brother, the little brother, but his activism there, because
Michael.
Michael. So because JJ was kind of like almost like the comic relief in a sense, right? But Michael was the one who kind of introduced him. So and again, I do think from the standpoint of civil rights, in a sense, he provided a platform that allowed us to see ourselves or different aspects of ourselves. Yeah, it did take hate to say this, we just spoke about Puffy and others, but it took like a Bill Cosby to sort of come and say, okay, let's show you a different side of black families, sort of thing, like that. But we at least did see ourselves on TV.
Yeah. Fred, I wanted to ask you briefly about the $700 million contract that Shohei Ohtani signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers this past week. Sent shockwaves through the baseball world, but also shockwaves through the sports world, because his contract is the richest in sports history. It surpasses Patrick Mahomes' 10-year, $450 million contract. Also surpasses Mike Trout's 12-year, $425 million contract. he signed a contract for almost $1 billion. That is absolutely stunning to me. Now, I understand that the market is going to hold whatever the market asks for, and the Dodgers are clearly making a lot of money. So, if you can pay somebody $700 million, you have to ask yourself, what is that person who's able to dish that kind of money out earning in that process? Do you have any thoughts about this contract? I'm a big baseball fan, so it absolutely appeals to me to kind of think about it. And I'm not hating on Shohei. He has earned it. He has performed. He's been the MVP twice now in just his 3 seasons. He's a two-way threat. He's not going to pitch next year because he just had surgery, so he'll only be batting. But he's a major bat in the lineup. He feels his position well. He is a advertiser's dream because a lot of the advertising things that I see him on, he's playful, he's friendly. He's the kind of person that you want to see kind of pitching your products. I mean, he's got the potential literally to make $1 billion. You're on mute, Fred.
I find it to be unbelievable. When I saw that, I saw some commentators that were saying that they probably wanted the flash heading of 700 million, but that if you actually kind of look at the present value, it's not quite that high. But that's a whole nother side story. That's, there's always the naysayers. But, I think it's an interesting time in sports where you're seeing, as you say, one team playing one player, $700 million when, you can go back and look just a few years back and switching sports, but the Magic Johnsons of the world and go back and look at some of the great athletes who didn't make that in their entire career or anything close to it. And so it's a whole new world out there. And I once again, the LA Dodgers can afford to pay that. And maybe some of the New York teams. I think there's a lot of clubs out there that, they don't even make $700 million a year. So,
yeah. Well, Scott Laughinghouse, what's up, my brother? It's good to see you on the feed this afternoon. He makes a good point that much of the contract over these 10 years is deferred, and he did that, which I think it also speaks to the person that he must be, too, because he's given the Dodgers a chance to not be handicapped by this contract on the front end. It gives them a chance to bring in other players and make other kinds of deals and things of that nature. And I think, a young person who's in this game, and he's a very young person, is going to be think about the money grab. Give me the money now. But he's obviously getting some great financial advice as far as this is concerned, and definitely has some mindfulness and thoughtfulness about this contract and what it does for the team as opposed to just for himself. I got great respect for Shohei Ohtani. I love the fact that he went to the Dodgers and he didn't go to an American League team to continue to destroy my team whenever he's on the field. And they may play the Dodgers a couple of times this year, but, it's not going to be as bad as some of those other teams that got to face them a lot more. So we'll absolutely see what happens in the context of that. Dave, I got to ask you this question as we begin to wrap up. There's a show that's been on for 29 years now, has won almost 40 Emmy Awards, and it's coming to an end this month. It's called Real Sports. And I am sad to see Real Sports go. 75-year-old Brian Gumbel, by the way, did an excellent interview with Jane Pauley this morning on CBS This Morning. It is one of the best shows. I'm not even going to qualify it as a sports show because it's been called the 60 Minutes of Sports, by the way. But it's one of the best shows on TV, and they've had some of the best, most effective reporters in that process over those 29 years. I know you're a fan of Real Sports.
I am. It's like you said, it's the 60 minutes of sports shows, and it just the quality of the reporting and the producing of that show, the topics and the caliber of the correspondence. I mean, they only have like the best of the best. I mean, it's phenomenal. Brian Gumbel has anchored that thing with the same kind of precision and efficiency that he anchored the Today Show way back in the day, and then later the CBS Morning Show. Yeah, it's going to be a loss for those of us who are sports fans. I'm assuming HBO will try to come up with something to replace it, but how do you replace Bryant Gumbel and that lineup of correspondents? I just, I mean, God bless him. Bryant Gumbel's an amazing guy.
Yeah.
Not to mention that one heck of a dresser. Always just dressed impeccably well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he's probably reached a point in his life where he's just like, yo, man, I'm 75 years old. I don't have to do this.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's got a stack, on a stack. He's got multiple bags and probably in multiple garages. I mean, he's set for life. So God bless him.
Yeah, I say the same thing. One more closing note. Manhattan Transfer, after 50 years, coming to a close. They did their last concert on this past Friday night. I don't know if you saw the post with our boy Claude McKnight mentioning that he had the privilege of introducing them. I had the privilege of seeing them when they were performing with each other, when they were doing that as part of the summit. Yeah. Where did you see the show?
I saw it on Catalina Island, off the coast of California, off the coast of L.A. That's where I saw it.
That's kind of like when you ask Keith about these questions about people that he knows, and he starts dropping names on you and stuff like that. I only went to the City Winery in Nashville and saw them. My boy Dave is going to say, I saw them on Catalina Island off the coast of... Bro, man, don't hurt me, man. I just asked you a simple question, man. You didn't have to give me all of that.
And he went there by helicopter.
No, man, I wish.
or yacht.
We got on this I guess they call it a ferry.
Yeah.
That goes from Long Beach to Catalina.
Yeah.
And right as we, I didn't think much about it until I was out there and I looked around and I was like, I don't see land anywhere. What in the world am I doing? But we got there, probably took about an hour and 15 minutes, something like that. Got there, was able to hang out with the guys at dinner before the show. The show was phenomenal. Hung out with them after the show. And me and one of your brother-in-laws, Joey, we had a nice, I'll never forget that. Me and Joey had a real nice long talk about some stuff, some family stuff that we were both sharing about. It was just a great experience all the way around, man. I was blessed to be able to do that. And the thing is, I don't even think I knew when I just happened to be out in California during that time. I don't even think I knew that they were going to be doing that until I got there, as I recall.
Wow. Yeah. It was a phenomenal performance. Manhattan Transfer has been one of my favorites forever.
Yeah.
They have won 11 Grammys. They've been an industry standard for so many years. And so just best wishes to all of them, and as they continue into the next phase of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So terrific thing.
Phenomenal.
Yes, indeed. Guys, we come to the point of commentators' choices, your chance to share anything that you'd like with our audience as we prepare to close things out. We'll start with Dr. Fred Greene.
Well, I look around the world, I look around at what's going on, and we see not only war happening in Ukraine, we see war happening in the Middle East. We see rumors of war happening possibly in China and Taiwan. And there are a number of wars that are still going on on the continent of Africa, where there's still bloodshed going on. And so, I don't know, I direct our attention to Matthew 24, which talks about wars and rumors of wars, and that these are the beginning of sorrows, that there will be pestilences and earthquakes and famines and different things. And so I'm making no prediction. I have no idea when the end is or whatever. I simply know that I see so many things happening in the world that makes me know that we need to be aware, and that we need to be vigilant, and that we need to remember and keep our faith and to keep our strength, knowing that one day God is going to end all this suffering and sorrow, and he is going to come back. And so that's my commentator's choice.
Thank you so much, Dr. Keith Burton.
Amen, 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 Dr. Greene. That's the Reverend Dr. Greene. Thank you. You know, I do want to just give a shout out to my youngest brother, Ken Burton. He keeps a lot of things close to his chest, but he was one of the music directors in Eddie Murphy's recent Candy Cane Lane, also in The Marvels. He always does a lot of TV in England, and there's another movie that he's worked on, but he's signed these non-disclosure agreements, so we don't really know until the movie comes out. So I guess he doesn't want to stop the checks, so he maintains that confidentiality. But my real commentator's choice, looking at President Zelensky, was just here seeking another $80 billion to help out with the war against Russia there in the Ukraine. And this would be in addition to over $110 billion that's already been committed. And I thought about that as it relates to priorities. And, if we have that kind of money to give out to wars, when we think about a reparation package, which I think should be a couple $2 trillion, if we just were to put a fund of $50 billion into the United Negro College Fund, with that endowment, say 5 to 7% a year, that would be between $50 to $70 million a year per HBCU, where folk can go through tuition free, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We say we don't have it. We say we can't do it. But yet, when it comes to the industrial military complex, somehow we find the will and the funds to do it. So I do hope that even as we push forth for reparations, that we'll think about ways in which we can form a message. There goes that word again, Kenny. We can form a message that says, if we could do it for Ukraine, surely we could do it for the sons and daughters of the formerly enslaved.
Dave Person.
Yeah, normally I come with something heavy for commentator's choice, but since this is the last what's going on segment for the year, I'm going to come light and say, first of all, while we were doing the show, Kenny, I was able to catch the very tail end of USC. Bronny James playing for USC. He was looking good out there, though Auburn University whooped USC. So props to Auburn, and sorry for Bronny. Also got to see Angel Reese with LSU, the champion, destroy Northwestern State. An in-state rivalry there. Angel Reese and her girls whipped up on them. They beat them by almost 60 points, I think. That was kind of laughable. Yeah. And then finally, two final things. One, I want to shout out a friend of the show, Dr. Jackie Campbell. We were at an event, the same event, like a Christmas holiday event. And the first thing out of her mouth when I sat down at the table and she saw me was, I just can't wait to. Now, when are you guys on? When are you going to be on? Are you going to be on this Sunday? We're like, no, Jackie's going to be next time. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to be listening. I mean, she just was, she's a big fan of the show, Kenny. So I wanted to pass that on to you and our friend Jackie Campbell. And then finally, for those who have not seen American Symphony, wow, what a documentary. It's about John Baptiste, the amazing musician from New Orleans who used to be the band leader on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. And it's about him and the battle that his wife, the health challenges and the battle that they had in trying to save her life. And while he was working on this beautiful composition called American Symphony. It's a beautiful documentary. Wow. And I would just say, if you're a fan of music, if you're a fan of John Baptiste, if you like a good documentary, you can't go wrong watching that. And it's on Netflix.
Awesome. That's good to hear. And we'll definitely, I just wrote that down to add to my list of Netflix. I plan to veg out on Netflix next week, actually, doing the Christmas week. and got some time to just kind of chill out and do some things other than what I typically do. So, and shout out to Dr. Jackie. Yeah, always good to hear her name and see her moving and shaking in the community, and certainly appreciate that.
Yeah.
Guys, my pleasure, my privilege as always. Thank you so much for being a great group of commentators today on what's going on. David Person, Dr. Keith Burton, Dr. Fred Greene. Always good to see you guys. And I will see some of you guys in the new year.
Mm-hmm.
Inshallah.
Scott, let me just throw Scott's comment in here real quick. Don't forget 24 Hours of a Christmas Story. So I think that's TNT or TBS, one of them. But definitely, I got to get at least 2 hours. I think the whole movie's 2 hours, something like that. I'll get some of that in there, Scott, because that is one of my favorite Christmas movies, by the way.
The Sound of Music for me.
Hey, everybody's got their favorites. All right. Scott says they're going to be on both channels, so you won't be able to miss it. TBS and TNT. Guys, good to see y'all. See you soon.
Take care, brothers.
All right. Take care. Folks, good to have everybody here. I'm going to come back in just a minute and tell you about what's happening on next week. I'm Kenny Anderson at Second Chance. Hope you're having a great afternoon.
Perhaps you have some ideas, comments, or suggestions that you would like to share. Or perhaps you'd like to be a guest on the broadcast. We'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to email Kenny Anderson at mxlife@aol.com, or you can like us on the Second Chance Facebook page. That's 2ND Chance. And now, back to more of Second Chance with Kenny Anderson.
Thank you once again for being a part of our conversation today. Thank you to my commentators, David Person, Dr. Keith Burton, and Dr. Fred Greene. On next Sunday, we've got conversations with Pamela Hope. She'll be talking about a brand new book. It's a children's book. It's called I Can, I Must, I Will. I'll talk to Dr. Renee Collins-Williams, who is the director of the Valley Conservatory. If you've not heard about the Valley Conservatory, you should and will on next Sunday. Brian Anderson joins me. He is the author of a book called Beautiful Scars and an organization with the same name. Will talk to me about some of the mental health issues and challenges that he is involved in helping to address, and so much more. We'll see you on next Sunday at 2 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. Look forward to the conversation. In the meantime, have a good rest of the week. And remember, as always, knowledge is better than riches. Have a great afternoon, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Second Chance. We hope that the information that was shared has been a blessing to you and that your life will be enriched as a result of it. We'd love to hear from you. So please send your email comments to Kenneth Anderson at mxlife@aol.com. That's mxlife@aol.com. And check out our Facebook page, 2ND Chance. That's 2ND Chance. In the meantime, have a great week, and we'll talk to you again next week. Good day.